listeners, and welcome to Good Evening, a special installment of ADK After Hours, where 3 ADK staff talk to someone they think is doing good work in the world, but who Rob Wiblin would not deign to speak to, and is often also someone who is one of our favorite reply guys on Twitter and has an impending departure to North America coming up. I am Matt Reardon from the One-on-One team.
I'm Bella from the marketing team.
I'm Cody Fenwick from the web team.
And our special guest, who has my meal replacement down by his right hand somewhere, is the meal replacer himself, Julian Hazell.
Julian from Canada.
Wait, is it Julian Hazell or Julian Hazell?
The former.
Okay, thanks.
Is the former the one that comes first?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is our expert content writer, everyone.
You're literally a writer for a living.
I just wasn't sure if it's different in Canada.
Oh, okay. That's the cover. That's
have the latter be the first one. Honestly, maybe.
You guys say Zed.
Yeah.
Z is correct.
But
that's why they say it.
So does Bella as well.
Wait,
Yeah.
Canadians say Zed?
Yeah.
You don't know this?
What a fucking betrayal. Such a failure to be America Junior.
They're also UK Junior. There's the
Well, I mean, let's just see how the GDP figures go.
I mean, look at our housing stock. It's British, you know.
It's British housing stock. Yeah, maybe that's a good point to start off with the news of the week, right? We're here in the UK, as we always are, and we are now officially in a recession.
Oh, yeah.
Yay, we did it.
Wait, what?
Well, like the UK. I didn't have anything to I was part of the British economy for a bit, but I didn't orchestrate it.
I see. It just implied that you were like excited about the prospect of like...
Oh, it was more like, you know, they really did some stuff that looked like they were trying to screw up the economy, and they pulled it off.
I see. Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about it. You know, we're gonna do all our favorite recession activities, like not spending money and being sad, etc.
That was one of. I think, Julian, was that the meaning of your tweet? You tweeted about the recession, right?
I tweet about England, the recession, not specifically, just more like the slow kind of burn I've seen of this country.
No, I had one particular tweet in mind, which was, you quote tweeted someone that said, you know, like breaking news, UK enters recession, and you edited out the enters recession.
It's just breaking UK.
I've heard some pushback on this. I've heard some people saying like, oh no, the UK is actually doing fine, or like the numbers have been exaggerated, and that actually if you correct for something, it's been going up consistently, and like, I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough to know what to believe.
Big Britain is paying this man good dollars to fudge the numbers.
It's the Queen. She's bankrolling it.
Well, you know, she's not really around anymore.
No, it's like okay, yeah.
I do feel like when you said that, you thought the Queen was still alive.
No. I sometimes do slip into that delusion.
I mean, it's very easy to. It's no knock
weird.
on you.
Sorry, I don't live in a country with a king. That's not a thing. I'm not in that medieval fantasy novel.
You're in the one with the Queen.
Well, no, it's like, that seems normal. That's okay, you know.
I mean, it does seem more progressive.
Yeah, exactly. So they did this thing when when the royal baby happened, where they were like, oh, if she's a girl, we'll make her the queen. And it's like just the first baby. And I was like so excited for another queen, probably not in my lifetime still. But then it was a boy. And yeah, it was boring.
What happens when we hit the singularity?
With the royal family?
Are we locking in?
Is nobody working on this question?
Not that I know of.
What are people at OpenPhil up to?
What are we up
Yeah.
to? We need to have an article on this.
We're
important research topics.
We're trying to figure out what's happening in Canada once we hit the singularity, which I guess, well, will just be what happens in the UK.
Probably.
Technically, you know, he's our head of state still.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I don't think I've heard somebody say he's our head of state.
Yeah, it's so
now
weird.
it's really sinking in for you.
No, that does feel very...
And
that feels like a dramatic
God
defense.
save the king? Shut up. Don't say that.
Wait, no, that sounds normal.
Does it?
Yeah, who's God going to save if not the king?
It's just like the 40s again. It's fine.
Well, I wasn't around then.
Do you guys
Contrary to popular belief.
think he saved her?
God?
God?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What an interesting question.
I mean,
Is Queen Elizabeth II in hell?
I didn't say that. It was just, you think the song came true?
I mean, she did live a really long time.
Yeah.
So, like, mostly, or like, relatively speaking, to like the lifespan of the human species.
Yeah.
so this country is kind of Protestant. And there's this interesting overlap between Protestantism. Do you know what I'm driving at here? And evidential decision theory, which is to say, like,
No.
Oh yeah, the like Calvinism,
Yeah.
like if you are the kind of person who would have been saved, you'll be good and not sin. Whereas if you like in a kind of like predetermined way, like would have gone to hell, then you'll sin, and so you should do acts that make
that suggests that you are
Yeah.
the kind of person who was saved, who was always saved.
who had already been saved.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, like, if you haven't read Less Wrong, you're going straight to hell.
Well, that could be.
That might be true.
Does the evidential decision theory stuff touch on your work at all, Julian?
I'll be honest, I haven't actually, like, learned what the different decision theories are. Like, in my mind, it's like a concept, but I haven't, like, taken 10 minutes to Google what the different ones are. I just
Awesome.
know it's,
I
like,
think it would
weird
take you
mumbo
more than 10
jumbo.
minutes.
And you think Eliezer's going to follow you without
I've given
that?
up. Yeah, whatever decision theory implies that he's going to follow me, I'm not following that one, apparently.
Yeah, so perhaps for the benefit of listeners and Julian, I will explain the two main decision theories that I know about through the lens of the Christian schism in
Oh, hell yeah.
Enlightenment times. So you had the Catholics, the OG church, taking, I don't know, the very like normie, safe, conventional causal decision theory take. That is, you want to go to heaven? Well, why don't you just do good things and that will cause you to go to heaven, right? Very conventional sense. You do something, it's a cause, it has an effect, the effect is you go to heaven. Then the Calvinists, and I think other groups of Protestants kind of came along and say, like, look, it was determined long ago at the creation of all things in the universe who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, all right? But you're going to notice things about your life if you're bound for heaven, namely that you're like, you have quite a lot of providence around you and you're like successful in your pursuits and businesses and relationships and people like you and things like that. And maybe you live a long time as well. So, you know, I sure hope you're saved. You better go seek out those signs that you've always been saved. So work hard and that will reveal to you that it has always been the case that you were
Yeah.
saved.
Isn't that still just doing, like, aren't you, like doing causal stuff then? If if it's work hard and go do the thing? Like,
I think it's a way to square so anyway, I think it's a way to square you should behave well and do good with determinism.
Yeah, but I don't think it really works, right? Because like you're still trying to apply a decision theory, and applying decision theory means you're open to deciding, and that means you can make a choice. And if you're going the Calvinist route, then you've kind of stipulated that you're not actually making any choices.
Yeah, and I think the way that evidential decision theory people get around this, and I think it's like pretty compelling, is like you think about compatibilism.
Yeah,
Right,
I was
where
about to
like
say that.
you know, you're like I don't know, your choices are actually illusions, but they don't feel that way.
I mean, I think this is true. I think this like works in the like traditional compatibilist materialist sense, and if you're like you want to be an evidential decision theorist in that sense, I think it works. But I don't think I think the Calvinists actually just deny the compatibilism part. They're like, no, you're not actually meaningfully making a choice. Like God just made all the choices. That's the only thing that really counts.
Right, and no, I think there's still. Well, I mean, we're now exhausting my knowledge of religious.
So I actually had the immense privilege of speaking in detail to a Calvinist at a party who would like, he was like really, really like wanted to explain his point of view, was not patronizing me, was like answering all of my questions like honestly and openly. It was so great. Like most conversations that I have with like super religious people, they're kind of like at some point they just kind of close off. They're just like, I don't really want to like talk about this anymore. He talked to me for like I think 2 hours about like Calvinism and basically. So his like life goal is he's like gonna go on, or maybe he's already gone by now, I don't know, we're not like friends, we just met this one time, to Georgia, not the US state, the country, to go on a mission and like save people, because he's like, okay, well, you know, some people are gonna like have eternal bliss and some people are gonna like burn in hell, seems like maybe the most important thing that I can do with my life is like increase the number of people who have eternal bliss and like save some souls. And he's like, if I even save one person, like that will make this whole like mission where I like give up all of my like worldly goods and like live in relative like difficult conditions in like a country I don't know with none of my friends, none of my family, like that will make it worth it. But then there's this whole like weird sense in which like all the people that he like saves like will have already been saved. And I was like, doesn't that like kind of undermine your motivation a bit? And he was like, no, not really. Like I can see why you're thinking that it does, but I just actually buy like the whole kit kat and caboodle of this philosophy, and like in that thing it makes sense that like I need to go and do stuff that like gives people this evidence that they are the kind of people who will have been saved or something like that.
I think maybe I'm coming around to that idea that like maybe like actual Calvinists who like buy into this and like trying to live their life by it are like at least implicitly endorsing some form of compatibilism, that like that's the only way they can like really make sense of their own actions, even if maybe the more sophisticated Calvinist theologians, or maybe not even the more sophisticated ones, would say like, oh no, this is actually how you should think about it.
I'm not sure. I don't want to like put words into this guy's mouth because like it was a while ago, so I'm not sure I remember it perfectly, but I think he did say something like he didn't endorse compatibilism, and he was like, look, I'm just the kind of person that God has made me, and he made me like be the kind of person who would go do this mission and like have this like feel this was important and like have this belief, do these acts in the world and such.
See, Sartre would say this is bad faith, but maybe that's just another philosophical rabbit hole.
So,
well, I mean, yeah,
let's go down it.
Yeah, I wanna.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an existentialism or Sartre expert, but I think the basic gloss is like, bad faith is when you alienate yourself from your own choices and your own actions, and you like, I think like the classic example is like a woman who's just kind of like acquiescing to be in a relationship with a man because she thinks that's just what's expected of her, and like so she just kind of goes along with it because she's like, oh, that's just my role in society, but like obviously it can apply to lots of different circumstances. And I think like Sartre would be very critical of this view that you're like, no, the only thing you can do in life is make choices, and that's like the one thing you've given up in this case, is saying like, oh no, God has made all my choices for me, and so you're not actually acting in fully in as yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My read is that this guy like seemed pretty happy and like maybe even psychologically healthy. Like he just like
maybe.
I'm serious. He was like he was like really committed to this thing, and he was like, it really matters to me. It like seems very important. I like think that it's just gonna like actually be like the most important thing I'll ever do. I'm gonna go do it. It's gonna be great. Is he an EA? Sounds like an EA. Yeah, like this is the weird thing. So I think this is like why the person whose party it was like interested in me talking to him, because he was like it's like weirdly adjacent or something.
I did talk to a philosopher recently who I won't name, but who is arguing that EAs should take the threat of damnation much more seriously because of like infinite ethics things.
I am once again asking if anyone's read Unsong.
Anselm?
Unsong.
Oh no.
What's that?
Wait, has anybody read Anselm? Saint Anselm? Sorry.
I read it when it was coming out. Live.
Yeah, I know. And
which has the bad effect for you of me not remembering very much about it. It was great.
It's a novel by Scott Alexander. It's about that, among other things.
What does he think? Should we?
Well, I don't want to give plot spoilers.
Am I going to hell?
Actually, the novel doesn't opine, but
okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would say yes, definitely.
Oh fuck! Can I swear?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Fuck.
So yeah.
Just got to get a few in for good measure.
There was another philosopher who had a response to this, which was like, "Oh, I can sometimes think myself back into like the time when I was a Christian, and I can be and like kind of feel that fear of hell that I used to have, and like feel it for myself. But like even when I try hard to think about it and like do the infinite ethics stuff, I can't actually be worried about other people potentially going to hell because it's like it just feels so distant from like any possible." Outcome that the universe could actually have, that like I don't know, even if you try and do some expected value estimate where actually like the infinities of suffering are so big that you just have to care about them, it's like it just feels far too out of reach.
Yeah, there is this phenomenon that people sometimes point to about EAs, right? That like supposedly informally or whatever, most of them did have some like very sincere religious beliefs when they were like kids or like younger adults and things like that.
I don't know what most of them means. I guess most of the world does, so it's a good bet. But
Oh, but I mean like they took it like more seriously than most of the like religious people in the world who kind of
Right.
just do it rather passively. They're like, oh no, this is serious shit. And yeah, have you encountered these claims? Do you buy them?
I feel like a lot of EAs are British and they're pretty secular. Right?
yeah, I recently saw, what is it, the article that you linked, Cody? I think it's 3 times as many atheists in the UK than the US.
Yeah.
It was 4% in the US, I remember that, and I think it was 12% here, but I'm not that confident.
And then that's glossing over like there are a lot of people who are non-religious but don't necessarily identify as atheists.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be surveys on the prevalence of religion in the EA community.
That's true, but I would doubt any of those surveys have asked like, well, when you were a kid, did you take like the threat of hell very, very seriously?
Yeah.
Someone should do that like soon. I'm curious.
Well, we have a whole 4 kind of EA people here.
Yeah.
Hands for took the threat of hell very seriously. Just me. Oh, and Cody. Hey,
Oh, yeah.
how about that? Okay, Julian, heal me. This is very important. Okay, and then yeah, I guess question for the group. Now that we've established that only Cody and I were influenced by the fear of hell, we should figure out whether we're 1 boxers or 2 boxers.
Oh, nice.
Wait, no, there can't be any 2 boxers here, can there be?
I doubt it, but go
Well,
ahead. So
Julian
Cody's
said
a
he hasn't
1
looked
boxer.
into decision theory. so
Yeah,
he's
I've
probably
heard
thinking about
this one,
for the
but
first
I
time.
didn't reach a conclusion. So,
Reach a
for the sake of the audience, why don't we just rehash that whole thought experiment?
So anyway, like your Calvinist friend, for example, I think maybe one way to square his compatibilism is like treat God as a perfect predictor of who you are, and the prediction has been made, but you don't know what the prediction is yet. You want that prediction to be a good one, like you're going to heaven. Anyway, replace God with someone who puts money in boxes.
God also puts money in boxes, right? If there's money in a box, God put money in a box.
I suppose so. That does check out. And yeah, you're presented with 2 boxes. 1 box is transparent. It contains $10,000. Another box is opaque, and it contains either $1 million or nothing. What determines whether the opaque box has $1 million or nothing in it is the output of a perfect predictor about how many of the 2 boxes you will take when offered them. And so if they've predicted that you will take both boxes, the opaque box is empty. If they predicted that you will take only the opaque box has $1 million in it. The boxes are set. They're placed in front of you. Nothing about their contents will change from this point. Do you take both boxes or just the opaque one?
Just definitely the opaque one.
Okay, good.
Is there something to this?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the supposed temptation for wanting to take 2 boxes is that the decision is already made. There's already money in the opaque box or there's not. And so in theory, if you get 2 boxes, you should get the $1 million and the $10,000. But if you just pick the 1 box, then like the decision's already been made. The money's either there or it's not.
Yeah, did you change the past?
I'm just like, fuck all that. I'm just going to take the 1 box and whatever. It's like the cost of
Yeah,
doing
I
business.
mean, this is one of the things about the thought experiment that I think is like
cost of doing business.
can cause some friction is that it's like, well, you have to stipulate that like this person is a perfect predictor and that you have great reason to believe that. And then it's like, well, if I have great reason to believe that, then like, yeah, I can like, why can't I just believe anything else?
You can relax that.
Yeah.
99% predictor, and I think you should still 1 box. There are other versions of the experiment which are interesting. For example, the perfect predictor is your grandfather, who put the boxes in the attic decades ago, and you go to collect them, right? And whenever you perhaps 1 box, right, you can just go back up to the attic and get the other box later. Do you still 1 box, essentially, including all the time that going forward and when you can take the other box?
Nah, I have a lot of self-control.
I thought you just... So you're bad at resisting things.
Yeah, no, this is exactly me having no will. Is I would just be like, oh no, he made the prediction. I'm resigned to that. I accept it. I'll take the 1 box, and like, I'm not gonna be tempted by that other box.
Well, the other variation that I like is what if both boxes are transparent?
Right.
Do you still take the 1 box?
I'm just like I'm just gonna like forego the $10,000 to like not think about philosophy.
Well,
And
okay,
then, like,
we
take
just
the
do,
million
we just
and
do
go
a
to
variation
Vegas.
where it's like 2 million is in the other box or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Like it's supposed to be like, oh, would you do this for this small additional incentive? But like if
Yeah.
you're like, I don't
Yeah.
know, for some reason I'm just going to ignore small
Yeah.
payments.
Yeah. Well, I guess in the case of the grandpa one, the thing I'm thinking of is like, you know, his like prediction of what you're gonna do is like possibly has some influence on like what child is born or something from him, and then that I don't know. There's some that.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I think the upshot is like, basically for all humans that I know or think about or introspect about, they're just always gonna get an empty opaque box, right? Because the idea is you come downstairs, you open it up, the million is in there, the 10,000 is just sitting there, and you can totally just go and take it, and there's nothing that's gonna take this million away from you then. The mechanism is you just never live in the world where you get the million, unless you like have this like deep faith that like, no, the reason I have the million is because I'm leaving that 10,000 up there, even though I know it's there and I totally could take it.
There's another version of this too, which Joe Carlsmith discusses on the other podcast that we don't talk about, and that's like, so you're in the desert and you're like you're starving, you're gonna die, and then a car is coming up. And you know, somehow it's stipulated, you know, that they will only come and pick you up if they can reliably predict that once they pick you up and drive you to a town, you will withdraw $10,000 from your bank account and like give it to them. And then so the question is, okay, so they pick you up and then they take you to the account, your bank account or your an ATM. Do you take out the money for them?
I think this is Parfit's originally, right?
Oh, is it Parfit's? Maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty confident. I could be wrong
I mean, Parfit definitely had some that were.
That Reasons and Persons is a long book.
I feel like everything is just Parfit's. He just yeah.
It's a safe guess.
We're standing on his shoulders.
So true.
Yeah, I feel like with the desert one, it's like I don't know. I feel like a big jerk if like they took me. I'd feel like there's some like elements of like virtue or something. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think you should necessarily feel like a jerk in the sense that like actually somebody should just pick you up in the middle of the desert if you're dying at like.
And take you to where they were going anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can stipulate it's low cost to them. But yeah, there's this thing of like, well, if you want to behave in a world where you actually get these benefits, you actually just have to cultivate the disposition to be cooperative and to live up to agreements like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm like, I would probably be like, oh, this person's kind of a jerk, but like they could save my life. Like whatever, I'll play ball. Like I would feel like personally like dishonest about it or something. Even though, yeah, I guess like I'm
that's
like,
true, but yeah, I mean, but you can always just like raise the cost.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say,
yeah,
if it's like yeah,
what if you have to like give up your house that like
Yeah.
you live in with your family? And,
Yeah.
like that is in fact better than you having died in the desert.
Yeah.
So like it is in theory something you should prefer, but then once you're there,
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to actually make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think it gets to like a weird point when it's like actually like super duper costly.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh geez,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool. So we circled there from something like proto-EA-ness, religiosity, something. Julian, you I think like literally within the last few hours tweeted about something that I'd call your origin story.
Yeah.
And it is related to I don't know why I try to keep this podcast topical. It's gonna be like 3 months. But Praju Prasad, who's a Twitter personality, is a young guy from Singapore, I think. He sent out this tweet being like, "Why are we all reading, Aristotle in philosophy classes? Isn't there better philosophy we could read? Maybe like Parfit. It's like haven't we like advanced beyond these ideas and like they don't read like Newton in Intro to Physics or whatever. I mean, maybe they do very briefly, but not like they don't like open up chapter and verse. It's like, why does philosophy do this and why is it useful? And then he got dunked on by some humanities person. And you kind of explained how this is related to how you got into all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to start by saying that I think the dunks are super lame. It's like totally a valid question. And like it just reflects extremely poorly on like the humanities people to be like, obviously this undergrad is an idiot and it's like my turn to like dunk on this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I was like quote tweeting a Carol Joyce Oates, is that her name?
Joyce Carol Oates.
Joyce Carol Oates. I was like quote tweeting her like saying, why do we need philosophy if we have like blah blah blah, insert scienceology, I forget which one she used. And I had like a similar thing happen like maybe 3 or so years ago, where I was like on some Reddit forum and I was like, what's the point of philosophy if we have like, in this case I was talking about economics. I'm like, we can use like scientific methods to understand like the nature of human behavior. Like, what is the point of this like thing that just like, I feel like we have better tools now. And like everyone threw like Rotten Tomatoes at me and called me stupid, which was like kind of fair. But then one person was like, oh, there's people doing like practical philosophy nowadays, and like some of that has like a pretty big impact, like, Peter Singer, for example. And then so I like Googled Peter Singer and I was like, oh, okay, this like seems pretty interesting. And then I think the thing from there was like, I watched one of his lectures on vegetarianism and was like, oh my God, like I gotta stop eating that stuff, man. And then the other one was like, I watched a TED Talk that Will McCaskill gave and I was like, oh, this is like really cool. So yeah, me being kind of an oaf on Reddit helped me stumble upon like EA stuff, like plausibly like a significant amount of time earlier than I would have.
Cool. I want to defend the oaf you a little bit. Yeah, I mean, obviously I think there are parts of philosophy that are incredibly valuable and like core to like figuring out who you are and what you want to do with your life. I think like in academic philosophy, if you just looked at all the courses and all the stuff on syllabi and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff where oaf Julian I think has a point. But I mean, it's an open question as to how much of a point oaf Julian had. Because I think it's something along the lines of, I would categorize this less as philosophy, as in like trying to answer something like real about like, I don't know, the nature of like logic or ethics, and more like literature and more just like, there's like a feeling that I have that I want to articulate.
Right.
And so I don't know, I feel like maybe a lot of the existentialism Sartre stuff like falls into this category. But I don't know, perhaps our resident existentialist wants to dispute this.
I think the best parts of this is so controversial, we're gonna have to cut this out, but no, I think the best parts of Sartre and existentialism can be framed in analytic philosophy, and all the rest falls into the category
okay.
Oh shit. I don't know what any of that means.
Well, like, you have to do it now. How do
what? Oh, I'm not saying I can, but like I'm saying like it should best be formulated as analytic philosophy, and it seems I think it clearly could be. I haven't done the work. Somebody should. Probably some people have.
Well, then how do you know it's possible?
Just because they're the types of claims that like you can actually analyze.
Okay, well, I haven't read Sartre specifically.
Yeah,
but it seems to me from my reading of continental philosophy that it's very much not the case. So I'm curious.
Well, no, I agree there are lots of claims in continental philosophy that you can't then analyze in analytic terms. And I'm saying like, yeah, that's the bucket we put in the stuff that Cody doesn't want to read. But then there's all this other stuff that I think like, is something that I would at least get value out of. But that's the stuff you can translate into analytic philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're doing like philosophy teaching hot takes, I feel like the distinction that you were pointing to, Matt, was like something like, I don't know, there's like interesting philosophy to be done on like answering questions about your life and also the world and also this kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, man, that seems really cool. And then there's like this stuff that's more like reading Aristotle or whatever. And Matt, you said that the former thing is more like literature. I actually think the latter thing is more like literature, or more like the academic discipline of literature, in that it's exegetic. So it is looking at a text and trying to explain or say something about what's going on in the text. It's like, okay, well, so Plato says this, therefore, we interpret it in this way, like here's this problem with it, the problem is resolved by this means, end of essay. And I find that stuff, like, I'm sure there's a place for it in society. I find it quite dull. And the discipline of philosophy that I was like, taught to study in was like very much that. I found it very irritating. Whereas I find that like trying to just like figure stuff out, it's like pretty cool. And like I know that undergrads aren't gonna have good answers, but damn, it was way more fun than like the other thing.
Yeah, to go back to dunking on oaf Julian, I think like one thing happening here is like, and I think this is like roughly what I think at this point. There's a lot of philosophy that I find like super useful and interesting for like figuring out what I should do in the world. And like, I think that philosophy is good. And there's like probably a bunch of other types of philosophy that I think are bad, in as much as I'm like not interested in them at all. Or like, I think they like are just a waste of time. But like, I also think there's a lot of like science that is just like crap.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like poorly executed as well.
Yeah.
And I think that much more strongly now than I did then. So I'm like, who am I to like rip on philosophy for being pointless and stupid when I think there's a lot of stuff operating under the umbrella that is science that is pointless and stupid.
Oh yeah, did anybody see it was going pretty viral on Twitter that what was it? It was some study about like sperm in mice or something.
That was the example I was going to give.
Yeah. You take it. Yeah.
I think it was something like a peer-reviewed journal, and like not just some random one. I think it was like a decently high-quality peer-reviewed journal. It was like some science thingy, whatever, life sciences thing, and it accepted a paper that had like a diagram of like I just remember like big mouse testicles. But like it was like created by like Dolly or something.
It was Midjourney,
yeah. And the text was gibberish and it didn't make any sense. But apparently that's rigorous enough to pass peer review.
I feel like the egregious thing wasn't the large mouse testicles. I think that mice have some of the largest testicle to body ratios of any animals. It was that the mouse's penis went fully off the page. And I was like, if you're designing a diagram to display like mouse genitalia, I don't feel like you want one where it's like just off the edge of the frame,
So I don't know if my like beef with this is like, oh, the like mouse penis to balls ratio is like totally off. I think my issue is like an artificial neural net just kind of like YOLO'd this image, and someone whose job it is to review science was like, yeah, that looks good.
I guess I have like I've started to wonder if like I don't know, maybe some part of the review process is like they like you also get sent like a text file that like has the image, or not a text file, like some other image file, right, that has all the images, and like, okay, you've reviewed the text, but like actually like images don't matter that much in terms of like the actual review process. So like somebody just kind of skipped that part or like just glanced at it and was like, oh yeah, that looks about right, and like it's just like there's usually not a problem with the photos. Like they're usually like there's some photos that they took during an experiment and you're like, okay, I can look at that. That's a photo, right? Like it's not actually doing any argumentative work about the like science claims. So like, yeah, maybe I have some sympathy for this editor letting something slip through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I relate to the editor in as much as like, no one's perfect. we all let things slide by accident every now and then. It's more like, the thing that I find funny is when people act like peer review is this like meticulous, amazing process. Yeah. And also like the same sorts of people who ardently defend peer review also complain about how bullshit it is. But then if like you're not within the academy and you say like, hey, maybe peer review has some problems, they're like, don't you dare say it about peer review. It is amazing. I will defend it. Like they're so ardently in support of it, even though like they complain about it all the time as well. This
is often when they're complaining about working papers published just on Archive about new AI ML results.
I love doing that. That's my favorite thing to do on the planet. I love how ML people are just like, or at least a lot of them are just like, yeah, we're just gonna put it on Archive, and it seems okay, Yeah. There's no mouse testicle diagrams fooling anyone. You just like read the paper and make up your mind by looking at it.
Yeah, less weight on the raw authority of the process or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is like some legitimate worries around the science of a lot of the study of LLMs, when like all the LLMs belong to these companies and they're like doing private research on it, and then you can't have somebody else go check the work because it's a proprietary model, blah blah blah, and like they're doing it on the non-public version usually. And like I think that is like a legitimate concern about how science is done. But I think these critics often don't realize that like, oh yeah, the way the science is done in academia has like tons of flaws as well. And
oh, I think there's tons of issues with like how academic research is done in ML that it's just not like confined to this like issue of, oh well, it's not peer reviewed. It's like there's like tons of issues of like, for example, if you're running an experiment with GPT-4 on one day, they might like update it or fine tune it another day and you'll have no idea. And so like reproducibility is like kind of an issue. And I'm like, does peer review like solve this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I spoke too strongly a minute ago about like, and maybe you did too, Julian, about just like, just read it and figure it out for yourself. I feel like there is a lot of value in a process that like some like non-expert layperson can say like, I don't know how to parse these claims and what's happening in this paper myself, but I do have some idea of the process behind the paper that I feel like is trustworthy. And so, like, you know, all the way up to like, I'm a congressional staffer who studied government or whatever, you know, and I can have some reliability in the summary and conclusion stuff, and make this fit with other things that I'm hearing. Like, this is really valuable, and maybe it's like an even better reason to criticize peer review and say like, hey, it's got this important social function, but it's not like doing it as well as it should be.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think like there a lot of like criticism peer review kind of started bubbling up from like the replication crisis in psychology, but I think it like just is clear it actually stretches far beyond psychology and the social sciences.
Totally.
And like I think it's kind of disturbing how much it like impacts medicine and like cancer treatments. But then like there are categories of medicine where it's like vaccine research really does just seem really good, and like it is really important that we can rely on it because as we can see, it like can save a lot of lives. And but it just does seem really disturbing that like it's not clear where you can draw the lines on like what the best stuff is. And like, you know, the vaccine research coming out during COVID, it's like, okay, well, like thousands and thousands of professional eyes were on that trying to make sure it held up. And like, I think you could have a lot of confidence that the scientific community was kind of all hands on deck for that situation, such that like they weren't going to let anything really egregious slip through. But it does just make you not feel great that like, I don't know how great cancer research is. I think like, yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if like there is some funny business going on in the world of vaccine research. We just like see the end result that looks really good, but what we don't see is like, you know, all the shitty research that people have to like dig through to actually find like the truth, and like all the stuff that kind of slows down actual good research from, you know, going from like actually working on the thing to like producing a vaccine. We just like see the vaccine.
yeah.
You have so little faith in the vigorous anti-vax community, Julian. If all that crappy research existed, I'm sure they'd be all over it.
The army of independent free thinkers.
Speaking of excellent peer review processes, Cody, do you want to talk about whether LLMs are protected by the First Amendment?
No, I didn't read this paper enough. I don't know. What would? Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for you to go off.
Wait, aren't you the lawyer?
I mean, in a past life.
I read Cody's summary, so I guess I can.
Well, Cody's LLM summary.
No.
Correct?
This was one of the times I didn't rely on LLM.
Oh, really? You wrote that summary yourself?
No. I just took the abstract and I put it in bullet point form. Which abstracts should just be in bullet point form, and it's ridiculous that people write these like 500-word paragraphs that like you would never put. Well, maybe some scientific writers would, but that you wouldn't plausibly put in like a book or anything because it's just too long. But then they're like, oh, when I summarize it, I'm going to make it the most difficult block of text to read ever. Why?
Yeah.
Why do people do this? This has to stop. And in fact, I think we need to be doing something about this.
Okay, great. Do you want to write the problem profile on it?
Problem profile. Fix these abstracts. Yeah. So no. So I guess like the article made this bold claim up top. LLM outputs are not protected speech under the First Amendment. And I like dug into it a bit more because I thought I was going to talk about it here. And I basically just think it was one of those situations where like, the title was this really bold claim that got walked back significantly in parts of the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I read like every line of the paper, so maybe that wasn't quite what he was doing. But yeah, basically, we had a little discussion on Slack, and I came up with this counterexample, being like, wait, there's no way that some court is just going to blanket say that like, if it's an LLM output, like it's not a First Amendment concern. Because they're like crazy shit that you can do with saying like, oh, we'll just mandate that no LLM can output anything that like supports the Democratic Party. You know, it's like, yeah, I think that's just like so obviously a core First Amendment concern that like, you know, in this hypothetical, Republicans are going to have this tool that like just like spreads this meme all over the world and affects other people's thinking and stuff that doesn't trigger the First Amendment concern. And I think like, yeah, somewhere in the paper he talks about like, oh, well, maybe if it's like core political outputs or something like that, then some scrutiny will apply. Well, now you're talking about when it applies and when it doesn't, which is not like some blanket thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the point about peer review is like, man, law reviews. Do you guys know how those work?
No.
It's like students doing them, right?
Yeah.
What the fuck? That's crazy.
So, I mean, like, yeah, like a second-year law student will decide whether a professor's work gets published. And there's just like hundreds and hundreds of law journals. Like every school has like 10.
What? Why?
Because students need
It's
something to do.
Yeah, and put on their resume. I was baffled by this when a friend of mine was doing a PhD in education, and like, yeah, he was like at Harvard, or it was basically a PhD, and and he was like on some like ed journal review, and like he had like these like famous professors submitting in education, like submitting papers to him, and I was like, wait, why do you get to review what they get to publish? It made no sense.
Nobody else is willing to do it.
Doesn't that just incentivize people to write stuff that like they think undergrads are gonna think is great or can understand?
Huh. I mean, I guess so. Like, yeah, like.
Well, sorry, they're not undergrads. They are grad students.
Or
but still, yeah.
second year law students.
Yeah, I mean, you're not that far out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. And I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I mean, and I guess I was on a journal in law school. And like, I don't know, something in me wanted to say something reassuring that I like knew wasn't true, which is like, no, faculty's around and they contribute. It's like, no, they're really not. It is just the law students. Yeah, I don't know, like, but like there's some like tradition or something where just like, I don't know, like the flagship law reviews of schools have these like really intensive competitions to be able to be an editor on them. And you basically have to be the best student. Or the best, like, you know, in the best top 10% or something of your class. And then like these journals are like institutions within the school. So they like pass over all these traditions. And I think those students are like very well plugged into academia and their professors, and they have strong relationships and stuff. And so they are in some ways getting advice. But once you're off of flagship journals, like it is just anarchy. It is just like students do what they want. The turnover from year to year is crazy high. Like just new students just show up and be like, well, I guess we got this thing now. And wow, look at all these professors emailing us. Like,
do students ever try and do anything shady where it's like after they've, you know, like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing? Like if they, like they'll be extra generous or something with the review, and then they might, you know, go up to the professor later and be like, loved your paper a lot. And like, I don't know, try and schmooze them somehow.
Yeah, write me a recommendation letter.
Yeah.
Give me a grade, something.
Yeah.
I didn't witness that, but I wasn't looking for it. It could be there.
Can we just talk about how insane it is that in American colleges it's completely normal for one person to just decide your grade based off whatever the heck they feel like?
Is that not how it works here?
No.
Wait, isn't that what it happens here?
No.
How are you graded?
Wait, how do you do it?
Well,
UK universities?
I mean, I don't know that much about it. I guess it varies between universities, but how it was at the university I went to, it was like each faculty would like have its own exam that was set centrally and would be administered to all students taking that degree, and then it would be marked anonymously by two different people, and they would give you the result of your degree based on the exams that you sat.
With those,
not based on your like class participation or whether you like went up to the professor and were like, please can you bump me up to an A.
It's even worse than this. You're often graded by TAs. Who are grad students.
That's
who are
nuts.
Just a couple years older than
That's
you.
completely nuts.
Actually, the TAs can even be other undergrads.
Yeah, I feel like in the, I'm going to say American, but I think it's the same in Canada as well. I think you that is true that, you know, there's more opportunity for like schmoozing your professor or trying to get your grade bumped. But like, you know, you're taking each semester 5 different classes with 5 different professors. So like over the course of your 4-year degree, you have to be like schmoozing a lot of people for this to like significantly influence your grade. And like, you know, some people do this, but like.
And if you do that, you kind of earned it.
But not by academic merit. And like, I'm not saying that standardized testing is so good at measuring academic merit to begin with, but I'm saying that like, at least I don't have to worry that like the fact that I dressed poorly is going to make somebody think that I'm I'm worthless and therefore they'll give me a D because I'll never amount to anything or something, you know, which I feel like is the kind of narrative that like I've absorbed from American media and people.
You've been lied to.
I've been lied to.
They don't notice. Like, at least, when I was an undergrad, we took like most classes are at least like 50 people. And so I'm like rocking up with like sweatpants on, just like.
They don't really know who
No,
you are.
I'm just like on Twitter on my laptop in the back.
They do sometimes grade your papers anonymously as well. Like you'll have a cover sheet with your name and they'll like, grade it without looking at that or whatever.
That's good.
The British process is surprisingly thorough. I think like law schools like try to take this super seriously. So you do like the professor writes an exam, everyone takes it in the same room at the same time, and you write it, and then it's blind grading, and then it's curved. But yeah, I mean the two people who grade your exam are not the person who wrote it and not the professor.
Yeah, I mean, again, I probably shouldn't make such a blanket statement as that so confidently. So it may be that it works differently at different unis or at different, even like faculties within the uni that I was at. So, yeah, but at least for mine, I'm pretty confident that's how it went. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess I'll maybe defend a part of the American system about like participation, for example, or whatever. Like, there's no like networking, presence, communications class, despite the fact that those are like important and valuable skills in society. Is can you like, can you like show up and on the spot like do something significant? And now, should it be like its own class, or should it be a small part of every class that you take? And like how small is like a good question, but like I don't know, maybe there's something to that.
I think this is getting at like what is the role of tertiary education, and I don't know, but like definitely that vision of it is something different to what I think my tertiary education saw it as doing, which was something like teach you to be an academic.
Yeah. Yeah, often it's like, teach you to do well in tertiary education
Yes.
is the point of tertiary
Yes.
education. Or to run tertiary education
Teach you how to
yourself.
play the game that is getting good grades.
Yeah, I got
Tertiary
taught
education.
to good heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in the UK it's less gross than it is in the US and Canada, because you have a lot more control over your courses. So you face this massive incentive to take a bunch of easy classes.
Right.
And boost your single grade number, which is like carries a lot of weight in what people think of your academic ability.
Yeah.
Cody, you look skeptical.
Yeah, is this what you did in your undergrad?
What do you mean in Canada? You did
Canada.
yours in Canada too.
Well, right. No, I was there and I did something different. I took all the classes I wanted to take because they seemed interesting.
Oh, I mean, some people do that. I did a mix.
But like also, I mean, unless you're going to graduate school, your
Yeah.
grades don't matter.
Right. Well, there's like certain career paths where your GPA, like if you want to go into investment banking or consulting, that makes like a big difference there. And yes, if you go to grad school, then also that makes a big difference. So then it's like, yeah, it is kind of weird that it incentivizes you if you want to go pursue higher education to like take a bunch of easy shit in undergrad.
Yeah, but they'll also like judge you on like, oh, it looks like you took an easy course load.
But they don't always know. And I also don't think they really comb through your transcript that thoroughly.
That requires some extra
Yeah.
investigation. I think most employers are not willing to do.
No, oh no, sorry. I thought we were talking about grad school. And like, if you're
Yeah.
applying to like a PhD program, they are going to
Oh,
scrutinize your
PhD.
transcript.
Yeah, PhD. I think probably. Although I would be surprised if they like perfectly account
Yeah.
for you taking easy courses, because some, there's like every university has some course that sounds really difficult, but is actually a joke.
Yeah, but like law and medicine and stuff like that, they're definitely not doing that.
Yeah.
Do you know my whole spiel? So for those of you pulling up my LinkedIn all the time, just to check out what med's up to, you might notice that like the place that I went for undergrad and the place that I went for law school are on very opposite ends of the kind of prestige spectrum. So
Wait, which one was more prestige? Which one was like?
well, I mean, Northeastern Illinois University was of course more prestigious than Harvard. Everyone knows that.
Sorry, great.
Wait, sorry, did you say Northeastern Illinois?
That's right. That is an intermediate direction
wow.
before the name of a state.
Oh, wow. I thought you said Northeastern. I was like, yeah, it's okay. You didn't even mean that one.
Shout out to our listeners
Oh
from
my God.
Northeastern.
Yeah, really.
Wow. You couldn't have just gone to like Illinois.
They didn't take me out of high school. And,
Wow.
And after I got perfect grades my first semester at Northeastern Illinois, I tried to transfer to regular Illinois, and they still didn't want me.
Oh my god.
They remembered you. Oh no.
That guy.
Did they offer you a spot in Southwestern?
Southwestern, because it's Southern Illinois is where you want to go.
Wow, good for you.
Um,
What was your secret?
Well, that's what I was going to get into.
Okay.
So like at least in like the professional schools, and at least as of God, how long ago was it? 8 years ago or something. They were playing the rankings game, and like U.S. News and World Report just looks at like your median and 75th percentile GPAs that you accept, and then your like standardized tests that you accept. And so Harvard, in their case, like they had a big class to fill, and they're trying to compete with Yale and Stanford, who have smaller classes to fill. They just couldn't be too picky about their numbers to keep those things up. And so, I went to the undergrad that I went to, and I think that like, yeah, I think that like there's kind of an implicit curve or whatever. And so it was just much easier for me to get a high GPA there than it would be for someone at a really selective undergraduate university. And I have a very high GPA. And I basically think this is like a very, very, very big contributor to like why I was able to go to a very top law school. And it is, yeah, it's just like gameable in this way.
It's crazy.
What do you think the trade-off is? Like, what would be the lowest GPA you could have if you went to like Yale for undergrad that would be comparable to the GPA you had at the university you did go to? Like, what's like the exchange rate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as I implied, like very unfavorable to Yale, where like it would have to be just quite high and quite close. For those of you familiar with North American grading norms or something, it's like, you know, my like 395 would, you know, maybe be equivalent to like a 385 or something.
Wow.
Like hardly anything.
Wait, so how does not, you know,
Sound quite
there's a lot of universities in America. A lot of people must get close to a 4. How are they not all just going to...
You need the standardized test to come.
Oh, okay.
So you got to do well on 2 dimensions.
Is there also the fact that like just a lot of people don't realize this and don't realize that like, oh, if you did really well at a university like the one you went to, that like you actually can get into Harvard?
Well, I think most people, when they decide what undergrad they're going to go to, aren't like certain that they're going to go to law school and that's what they're optimizing for.
Right. No, but my claim is that like the other students in your cohort at your undergrad wouldn't have realized that like, oh, getting high grades here means I actually do have a decent chance of getting to Harvard Law. They're like, oh no, I think I'm not the kind of person who could go to Harvard.
I practiced the LSAT with some of those people.
Yeah.
They were going to fall down on that dimension.
Sure.
Here's the thing I'm confused by. Like, I buy that this exists, and I also buy that a like, you know, significant fraction of people who get really high GPAs at like rando schools in the US, for example, don't like crush it on the LSAT. But aren't there just like a lot of people studying at all these different schools? So wouldn't you assume like there would be a lot more like maths out there who would have this like similar sort of like high GPA at a like low ranking school, but then just like did well in the LSAT because they like either studied really hard or they were really good at standardized testing, or like, you know, occasionally like, you know, really great people do go to like not top ranked universities. So I would expect like Harvard to be just filled with like people from all kinds of universities, but I suspect it's like a lot of people from Harvard and Yale and Stanford and whatnot.
Yeah, so the latter thing is true. And I don't know, I think the basic explanation is just like, if you're able to get a good combination like GPA and standardized test score at time 2, you're also able to do that at time 1.
Right.
And so you just got filtered into like much more prestigious schools in the undergrad game. Which like there are people like me just rolling around out there, and I think because there was like this big change that happened for like me over those years, and like people like that, but they're a minority because of this like selection effect, and like, you know, 4 years isn't that much time to become a new person.
Yeah, what was the change that happened with you?
Man, good question. Yeah, I think like just getting to choose my classes was a big deal. Like if I were in the UK, I'd be fucked.
Why?
My sense is that the UK undergrad system is just like, well, you do something at the end of what Americans would call high school.
Yeah.
And then you get into a degree program.
Yeah.
And like most of your coursework is quite fixed.
Almost all of it, yeah.
Yeah. And so I just, it's like high school take 2. I just like have to do all this stuff. Whereas in America, it's like, welcome to university. Here's 200 courses. Pick your favorite ones. And I was like,
awesome.
that one.
So good.
And like, because I picked them, I felt like, I liked them and I did well at them and got those good grades. And then I think like, you know, contributed to like some degree of self-confidence and also just interest in like intellectual subjects. And
What did you study?
philosophy and econ.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, what if you just pick the wrong thing in the UK?
You're fucked. I mean, you can you can like sometimes they let you transfer like early in your first year. So if you figure it out real quick and what else you want to do, and it's similar enough, and the departments are kind, and the stars align in exactly the right way, then you can switch.
Oh goodness,
Yep.
a lot of ifs.
Parfit started out studying history, and he only later moved into philosophy.
Yeah, but they sometimes will just like not let you, or they'll be like, you can, but you have to like take a year out, and so like you delay your whole life by a year.
And and you're not given an opportunity to like shop around and like see which different courses
definitely
would
not.
be good for you.
I mean, you can just like go to other lectures because no one's checking whether you're allowed to be in the lecture. You just do whatever the fuck you want, but that's not really the same thing. And yeah, like they'll get pretty annoyed at you if you try.
Why? What's their reason? Do you have any idea?
Tradition.
Yeah, I don't know about the history of it, like why it was set up this way as opposed to the American way, like what the difference is there. But I guess like if I'm thinking I'm a university now, why do I want that to be the case? Well, I've got a certain number of teachers for a certain number of spots. And if people are going to be switching, then I've now got more people in Chinese and less people in law than I was expecting, you know, and it's going to screw with my life.
Yeah, but we have computers.
Not at UK
What?
university.
You can figure stuff out.
Julian, didn't you hear about the recession?
Yeah, true. Well, if they let people switch more, we'd have a better allocation of human capital. We would not be in a recession. We'd have more housing, probably.
Probably.
Julian for king?
Yeah.
I'd
Same.
support you.
Yeah, when's the next vote for on that?
I have bad news.
It actually might be quite soon because he has cancer, right?
The vote might be
We're going to
soon.
have to run that one by the charity
Yeah,
commission.
really, yeah. Yeah, you know, Matt and I are here on visas. We can't just be like mouthing off about the royal family.
They're
And
fine.
nor can she.
Sorry, they have way
They don't
bigger
have free
problems
speech
than
here.
whether two random Americans are being like, "Oh, the king should die." Like, they've got people like plotting to kill them, probably. Like,
Well, not two of the people sitting on this couch, at least.
I have no intention of killing the king. I just, you know, wouldn't slow his natural death.
I would, and I will say that on the record.
Though I am a guest, I want to establish an official consensus here that we are anti the king dying. Is that like an official
Oh, yeah.
thing we all agree on?
That's an 80K house view.
Yeah.
And I think we also do mostly reject the act omission distinction.
Yeah.
True. That's true. We do.
Mostly. I mean, yeah, there's some wiggle room in it. But not the wiggle room's all in it's not helping Bella.
If you could have interfered with the cancer like growing in the prostate, but then you didn't. Is it the same as you? I don't know. Can you like, plant the cancer in the prostate?
Yeah.
It's an important philosophical question.
I
Back in
could've-
my Reddit days, I would have never had an answer to that. You can't run RCTs on that.
No, you can't.
So Bella, did our discussion of the American education system and all of its virtues get you any closer to supporting the old...
Oh my god, Matthew, you have to stop talking about this.
The old what?
I want to put a big American flag on the wall for
Let's
the
go.
podcast. See, Julian says,
Yeah,
"Let's
I'm
go."
down.
It's not even American.
Yeah, USA.
No,
I'm gonna
no.
I'm on a green card. They're gonna get mad if I don't say that.
Is a condition for your residence in America that you have to support the installation of flags in unrelated rooms?
Like, honestly, I would actually not be surprised.
I think it's not very tasteful. And this room is very, you know, it's minimalist. There's some plants. There's some kind of
All the couches match.
O'Neill.
Yeah, that's just because you guys lost back in the day.
What?
The UK.
Are
Yeah,
you talking about the American Revolution?
yeah, yeah. You know, this is a big deal. People are still a bit, antsy about it.
Are they?
I don't know.
Is this a hot button political issue that I don't
What?
know about?
Wait, wasn't Canada on their side?
Yeah,
Oh, shit.
wasn't Canada
Were we?
on our side?
Yeah, you burned down our White House.
Oh, I thought that was for a different.
That was the
thing.
War of 1812.
Sure,
we?
but
Yeah.
like that's because
Yeah.
there's still
Because,
animosity
yeah,
post the
and because they were
Oh,
just
right,
like
okay.
a completely incorporated like
They
part
were
of the
British,
Empire.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, never mind. Don't put up the flag. Yeah, I disagree with that.
All right. Well, I had to make that gag.
sure.
I could go in a very dramatically different direction, but Julian, do you want to play a game?
Yeah.
Let's play
It's the game that you brought because I don't know what the game is.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. Okay, here's the thing I was referring to earlier. Let's have an info hazard sharing contest.
No. You know this is a recorded thing to be broadcast and shared.
Yeah, I know,
right?
but like, how brave are you?
How brave are you?
Okay, fine. Forget my idea.
I will share the info hazard that is the unilateralist curse article. Everyone go read that.
How's that an info hazard?
Yeah, isn't that like
It's just supposed to teach you about not being unilateralist, which is kind of what info hazards are about. It was a little. I was turning.
Oh, I see. It was the opposite of what Julian said. I understand now the purpose of your humor.
Look, I mean, no one else did. So
but there is a paper on info hazards.
Ooh, I've got an info hazard that we can share.
Okay. Yes.
you have a tongue and it's in your mouth right now,
Fuck.
and there's a feeling of it in your touching your lips and your face and your teeth and everything. You're welcome.
I was already so aware of my teeth.
Yeah.
No, my tongue.
Get more aware.
Bella, that's a great way to keep us talking on this talking thing that we do.
What's another one? There's got to be another.
Roko's basilisk.
No.
Is that an info hazard?
That's
Yes.
fine. No, I don't think it is.
Not at
Really?
this point. It's been.
You'd have to be pretty dumb
To believe it.
to act on it in any way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we said the word. Precocious listeners will just Google it themselves.
I feel like
Really,
it's
you
part
can't
of the
spell
discourse.
Roko.
Yeah. Wait, and is that the same Roko who's still going around tweeting?
Yeah, it's
And,
that
and
guy.
his
The
takes
worst
are 100%
They're
terrible.
so
He's-
bad.
Yeah.
He's the women shouldn't vote one, right? And also small men.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Small men.
Okay,
He
I know
blocked.
that.
He blocked me ages ago.
Oh.
Because you're too large.
Because yeah. Wait, is he pro or anti small men?
He's
He
anti-
likes them in a certain range.
Sorry, I'm actually not that confident this was Roko. Maybe it was some other guy. But I think it was. Where he was like, the take is like, you should only be able to vote if you can like see the world free from like fear of like physical like punishment if you hold like ideas that are contrary to that of the majority social group or something. So you have to be like, not only you have to be a man, but you have to be like kind of strong man who can like, forge out on his own and like fight off enemies if you need to or something. That like this meaningfully affects your psychology. So like if you're the kind of person who would depend on others for your survival, then your views are always going to necessarily be like more tied to your social group or like whatever's popular.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that.
Yeah, I don't
Shockingly.
really see an actionable plan. I'm open to being convinced.
Wait, how do you just like go around and wrestle everyone, and then if you win, you get to vote?
Yeah,
I think it's just like you introspect about whether you're Chad enough. Like, are you a Chad?
But then all the people, there's gonna be tons of people who are not Chad-like and are like, yeah, I'm a Chad, of course, and then they're gonna go cast a vote, and then how do we assess whether or
Yeah.
not they're actual Chads?
Yeah, maybe there's some objective tests. I don't know.
Does like Roko
Maybe you
have
like
to
run up to
wrestle
them
them?
and you go like boo, and you see if they flinch.
Yeah, no voting for you.
Yeah.
Okay, Julian, for your Twitter goals, you can
Yeah.
be as quiet as you want for the next part of the conversation.
Okay.
Eliezer Yudkowsky. Useless? Worse than useless? Which of the two?
Which of the two? Those are the only two options.
I mean, are there other options?
Well, I'm currently reading Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, and I'm quite enjoying it so far.
Useful for fan fiction. We have one vote.
I'm only like a third of the way through, I think, or I'm like chapter 40 something. But I think it's pretty good. I would give it a thumbs up.
Is its author's presence in the media helpful for, making progress against major world problems?
I don't know. He certainly seems to have been very compelling to a certain kind of person. I don't agree with every single one of his views, but, directionally they're more similar to mine than, the average person or something. So it's kind of...
I'm not sure that's right.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think the average person's like pretty spooked by AI. Eliezer's like crazy nanobot stuff. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you think that.
Yeah, sorry. I think I haven't adapted to the Overton window having shifted in the last checks watch 3 days.
Yeah. Seriously.
Like,
I'm with you, Bella. I don't buy the surveys.
yeah.
We talked about this in episode 1.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, I want to be clear. I don't buy the surveys fully, or I don't think I do. I'm like, they seem a little, a little too good to be true. But like, even if you adjust them down pretty considerably, I'm like, yeah, that seems reasonable. Just like I don't know, talk to people about AI. Like, I feel like I've talked to tons of my friends, and they're my friend who broke the news about Sam Altman being outed from OpenAI.
Outed.
Oh, that's not it. I think I wanted to say ousted.
I think he's been out for a while.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Removed from OpenAI. My friend who told me about that texted me a few days ago being like, did you see this is how I found out about it. He's like, did you see the OpenAI video thing then he's like, "Is it over?" And I'm like, "Oh God, what do they do now?"
Is it over? Like, is
Just
it
like it.
AI.
No,
like the world.
Is the world over because of Sora? No.
I don't think it is, but I understand why people who aren't, thinking about AI all the time would look at that and be like, "That's fucking crazy. What the hell is going on?"
Yeah.
But this is going to be released in a couple months, and so that'll be sorted.
Yeah. There's already people who are like, "Oh, the physics aren't perfect." I'm like, do you realize what bar that is? It can't perfectly simulate physics. Like, yeah, like, thank God. Seems like a big deal.
So you guys have no problem with like the kind of like, I don't know, most visible person talking about AI risk saying that like he is virtually certain that it will manifest itself and that the only measures are to like totally stop this industry that's creating products that like millions of people love?
I think it is a problem that some of the on like both sides of this debate, I feel like you most often hear from the people who are most confident in their views and often, in my view, overconfident. And I think that like really distorts the perception of the debate, where it's like a lot of people I think are like, no, we're not sure what's going to happen, but there seem to be a lot of interesting arguments and compelling reasons to think we should have some concerns that the risks are large. Don't necessarily know how big they are, but like if there are things we can do that seem quite good in expectation and will likely reduce those risks down from wherever they are, then like let's pursue those goals. I feel like that's like a message I'd want people to be hearing a lot more than nah, we're 99.9% doomed, but maybe if I try some kind of out of the box thinking, I can get that down to 98.9 or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't think that's a particularly useful message for people to be hearing.
But Cody, I think this is like just true of all discourse, right? Like on any subject that is like a hot button issue that like people feel very strongly about, the people that you're going to hear from are the people with the strongest views in either direction. Like the like there's some chance that this thing happens does not make headlines, and so people are just used to this. Like I know that whatever thing I'm hearing on whatever thing it is like they've just found the angriest guy and they put him on a stage, and like I'm just internally like, not thinking that's representative of like the average person's view.
I don't know if that's happened with AI discourse. I feel like the most prominent sorts of voices are like a Yoshua Bengio, or like I think in this particular bubble we see the like crazy stuff on both sides get amplified, but like I feel like actually in totality of like the entire discourse, it's like pretty reasonable ish. Like like the case letter, for example. Probably like I mean that was like heavily represented in the media, and that was just like a pretty like
that was very
middle line statement that like a lot of AI experts were agreeing with. And yeah, I guess I'm just like I don't know if like most people in the like general population hear like Ian LeCun talk about like how AI risk is fake, or like Eliezer being like we're like certainly doomed.
But I think I mean like I don't think like the case letter I think is an interesting example because I don't think it actually comes up when it matters, right? Because like when the stuff happened with Sam Altman's ouster from OpenAI, the temporary ouster, a lot of the coverage was like assuming like, oh, this must be the EAs because the EAs are the ones who are worried about this like crazy AI X risk scenario. And it's like, well, if you read the case letter, you'd know Sam Altman is one of the people who was worried about AI X risk. And but like it's weird that like part of the narrative like was completely forgotten and ignored in the coverage, and like I think that would have created a much more nuanced and like picture that like people would want to investigate more and like really figure out what's going on here rather than just believing one side or the other.
Yeah, I feel like people just don't buy it. Like it's really easy to do like mental gymnastics to like convince yourself that like Sam Altman is like this like guy who wants like I feel like the EACs can like claim him as their own, or people who are like safety conscious can be like Sam Altman takes this seriously. And I think just like I think a lot of people just like look at the case letter and are just like I don't know, I don't think they actually think that.
Yeah, and I mean I think my like driving question here is like, well, like the public perception of this issue gets framed and formed, like who's the face? So like I don't know, I'm old. Cody's kind of old too. I remember when climate change was like a nascent issue on like the grand stage, and like who the face was Al Gore, the Vice President of the United States, a really mature guy. He came out with this documentary called An Inconvenient Truth, and that was like one of the big driving forces behind that now becoming a totally legit thing that gets tons and tons of attention and effort and money. And it's like, I look at Yudkowsky and I think he's not my Al Gore.
Yeah.
I don't think he will be at the forefront though.
I want Bengio and Hinton to be there.
Yeah.
And they sort of are. I mean, when you look at who goes on like national news programs, it's those guys, not Yudkowsky. But I think there's some risk that Yudkowsky's getting his face out there.
Well, so I mean, I think like Twitter just does matter because tons of journalists and media professionals are there, and like the conversation they see on Twitter just does influence the way they cover these issues. And like I think it has made them treat the AI safety world a lot more skeptically than they would have otherwise. Even though I think you're right that like a lot of the public perception is, and like that does show up in some polls that do suggest people think AI could be an existential risk. I think like a lot of the people who are like thought leaders and like helping shape the discourse are much more suspicious of the narrative.
Yeah, I also just wonder like how does like the rate of progress and how salient it is like feed into this? Like, what is it going to be like when it's just like, there's GPT-6 and it's doing all this crazy stuff? Like, that seems like really relevant for the narrative. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe there's some degree of like, if it's like set right now, maybe it'll persist or something. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of the stuff right now, I'm just like, like people don't really buy it. And my hope is that if we're in like a slow takeoff world, there will just be like increasingly obvious signs that like this stuff is going crazy, if in fact that is what happens. So I'm just kind of like, is this all just like, does this all really matter right now?
I mean, I think you're probably acutely aware that it takes like a lot of like planning, preparation, coalition building, thinking work ahead of time to get a better outcome generally. And so like the earlier you can like, bring more people around and convince them, the more valuable that is. And so like there's something to be played for in the kind of like public relations comms kind of stakes right now, right?
I guess the question, I'm like, should we just be like skating to where the puck is, to use a very Canadian analogy? Like, trying to like, I guess like stake our ground right now about like, look what GPT-4 can do. Like, to me, that's really convincing. I'm like, holy shit, look what this thing can do. But like, maybe it's like, let's plan for what happens when these things start like autonomously doing stuff in the wild, or there's like some crazy results about like the system can, I don't know, do cybercrime on its own, or like the Mustafa Suleyman's like his like, I forget what he calls it, some form of Turing test where it's like, can the thing autonomously make like $1 million? I think now like this like video generation system is like, is it called Sora or something like that? Yeah, I think that's going to be like a huge like very obviously salient indicator to people that are like, this stuff is like really progressing quickly. Like I remember when DALL-E 2 came out, like it was like not even like 2 years ago, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was like, maybe Sora's a bit different, but I don't think DALL-E 2 was this like massive update towards like, wow, capabilities are going crazy. It was more like a little bit of that, but also just like you can just like see the thing, like it's producing images. Now the video stuff is like, whoa. I think this will be another moment where people are like, this is serious. Like it's really doing a lot of stuff.
Huh. Bella, do you have a sword?
Do I have the same sword?
Oh, is it still here?
Yeah.
Oh, like a literal sword.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was like a metaphor.
I did take it home, but I brought it back again because I only ever go to sword fighting class from here.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I should keep my golf clubs here, eh?
Yeah, smart.
You go to sword fighting class?
Yeah.
Like fencing?
Yeah, it's historical fencing. So it's like
okay.
Based on the traditions of like medieval, what we mostly do in Italian fencing master.
Wow. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You just like, Google, it's called like HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. Google that for whatever city you're in. If it's a big enough city, there'll be one or a couple. There's 3 or 4 in London, depending on how you count something being a HEMA school. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
What, do you use like the really like thin swords?
It's somewhere between that and like a kind of sword you see in a movie. So they're not like quite like the full blade thickness, just because that would make the things quite heavy and like potentially dangerous. But they're like thicker than like a classic fencing like epee or whatever.
I feel like anyone who does this sport should automatically get to vote under the system. Well, I mean, okay, to be clear, on the record, I think everyone who is, what is it, 16 here? 18?
It's 18 here.
Yeah, I think everyone should be able to vote. But if we were to do this, like, you know, kind of like how tough are you system, the sword people automatically get it, no questions asked.
I mean, I should inform you I'm very bad at it. Like, I'm extremely bad.
Yeah, but you're trying, and I feel like that signals something
Yeah.
about your, whatever, democratic fitness.
That I can pick up a sword?
You know, there's-
mostly you just need like a hand and like an arm.
yeah,
Most
but
people
like,
have
I don't
One
know.
of those.
I haven't picked up a lot of swords. You know, you get at least some credit.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anyway, now that we've determined
That Bella could vote.
the criteria for democratic fitness, which is a new term we coined. Yeah, I think it's about time to wrap, eh?
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.